All right. I'd like to hear what you both think regarding the deaths of Bud's trainees in the past few months.
Yeah, look, this is something that's been all over the news. Our Buds is basic underwater demolition SEAL training, and that is the basic SEAL training program. That's the pipeline that we all go through, that we graduate from. It's about a 27-week program or so. It's got a 70-80% attrition rate. It's widely considered some of the toughest military training in the world. It's tough training, and it needs to be tough training. Because we expect SEALs to be able to perform at a very high level on very dangerous battlefields across the globe in a lot of highly dynamic and high-pressure situations. So we got to keep those standards high. One thing that's misleading is there was, they're saying, well, three deaths happened in a short period of time, a few months back at Buds, and that's actually not true. It wasn't. Two of the three deaths actually didn't happen in training, and so people need to understand that.
So what were the three deaths?
So there was a one death actually happened in training. There was a death of a student that drowned in the pool while going through an evolution. And the instructors, were there. They tried to resuscitate him, got him to the hospital, but they couldn't bring him back. He was gone. So that is a training death. That's the one training death. The two others that happened was a student that quit training, he dropped on request, as we call it, which is, again, most of the students that go there, this ends up happening.
Most people quit.
Most people quit. That the 70-80% attrition rate means most of those folks are walking away. So they're ringing the bell and dropping on request, which is, quitting the program. So a horrible situation, but this individual, the student, apparently that was weighed heavily on him, that he quit his dream to go to Buds. And on Liberty.
Meaning he quit, and then he went out, wasn't under supervision anymore, went into downtown San Diego, went to a hotel, jumped off the 22nd floor, killed himself.
Which is horrible. But that was not a training death.
No.
Even though he was attached to the command at the time. And there's certainly, I'm sure they're taking some substantial steps to maybe try to monitor guys a little bit more. But you can't, while horrible and tragic, and they're going to try to do everything they can to prevent that, you can't put guys in jail for 6 weeks after they quit. I mean, you can't be with them 24/7. So I think it's hard to hold, the center responsible, our training center responsible for that death. And the other one that happened was another guy who had quit training, a student who had quit training while on Liberty, got drunk and crashed his car and was killed in a car accident.
Motorcycle. Was it a car?
I think it was a car.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think you just kind of explained these things. Well, one of them is training death. Training deaths shouldn't happen. It's horrible when it happens. A lot of times there's been other drownings in the past. Oftentimes there's some kind of a medical issue that the person had. I don't know what the results of this guy's autopsy are, but the guy that killed himself, this was one thing that I found interesting. I was talking to one of the guys, one of my buddies that works over there still, and I saw a picture of the guy that killed himself, and dude looked like a stud. They had a couple pictures of him. It almost looked like a professional photography of a guy. He was like a rugby player, and he was just looked like a stud. And I mentioned this to my buddy that's an instructor over there. I said, "Hey man, that guy looked like a stud. What's going on?" And my buddy said, "Hey Jocko, they're all studs." So when I went through training, no one knew about the SEAL teams. There wasn't this big giant. We didn't have this huge publicity that we have now. And so if you want to go to the SEAL teams, you kind of had to search it out. It wasn't just the SEAL teams weren't going to just land on your doorstep. You had to figure it out and go for it. And so there wasn't there was all kinds of knuckleheads going through training. And he said, when you look down the line and when you talk to these kids, they're the captain of the team. They're the class president of the high school. They're studs. And so it's no different with this kid. The kid was a stud, and I think, and actually in reading some of the articles about him, this was his lifelong dream. He had told everybody, "I'm going to be a SEAL. I'm going to be a SEAL. I'm going to be a SEAL." And I think he quit on Wednesday. I want to say Wednesday. I don't know when he quit, but he quit in Hell Week. And since he told everybody that's what he's going to do, that was the stress was too much to bear to go back to everybody and say, yeah, I didn't make it. So
I want to be clear. I mean, these are horrible. It's horrible to lose young, good young men who aspire to be SEALs, and whether they're killed in an auto accident, drinking and driving or not, or a suicide. This is horrible, and we want to try to prevent that. I'm sure. I know that our training center is doing everything they can to try to prevent that. But again, you can't lock these guys up. Yeah. You can't be, at some point, they have to be released to be on liberty. We can't be with them 24/7. So, you can counsel guys, you can talk to folks. And what's a shame about, the suicide is, I mean, some of the best guys we served with, guys like Mark Lee and Mike Mansour, both had quit buds, rang out, got some maturity, went to the fleet, worked hard to get ready and come back, came back, knocked that training out of the park, and we're outstanding team guys. So that's a horrible tragedy, definitely. But I think what's important for people to understand is, for the actual training death, this stuff there's a lot of protocols in place. It's very. When I was an instructor there,
because you were an instructor there. Yeah. For those of you that don't know, Leif was an instructor at Buds. I was never an instructor at Buds, but Leif worked there. You worked Hell Weeks.
I did. And so what you don't realize when you're going through it as a student, it just seems like mayhem. These guys are, putting you through all these difficult things. Well, it's very controlled. It's very controlled. And there's a lot of supervision, and there's a lot of different safety checks and medical checks and all those things that are happening all the time that are going on behind the scenes that the students don't even realize. So, it doesn't mean every instructor always behaves the way they should, but most of those guys are outstanding professionals. There are levels of leadership that are there to ensure that they perform well and do what they should do. And in almost every case, that's the case. Those instructors are doing an outstanding job. I think the important thing here too is to understand that those standards have got to be high. And there are a lot of people outside the SEAL teams. We've had a lot of pressure on us right now, particularly with the push to open up all of special operations and infantry units to women. This is a new push under the administration, and our Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus, has been all over this and pushing that, and wants to see women graduate from the SEAL teams. And I think he's pretty open about that. And so I think the danger here and the concern I have is that they'll use something like this. The politicians who don't know what makes a good SEAL. They like to think they do, but they don't. They have no idea what makes a good SEAL, and they don't understand how difficult combat is. People ask us sometimes, Jocko, and I get questions like, "Tell us a good Bud story." Like, we don't talk about Buds because everybody's been through Buds in the SEAL teams. And listen, Buds is the kick in the nuts. It's a good training program. There's some stuff that's hard, certainly. There's some stuff that wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be or should have been, but a lot of it's quite challenging and difficult. But it's a screening process, and to weed out the guys that we don't believe have the characteristics that are going to enable them to succeed on the battlefield. A lot of that is just the will to succeed and persevere through some really difficult challenges. So it is critical that those standards remain high, because combat is so much harder, physically harder than training.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. You said, hey, it's important that we find that they have the will. There's also a level of physical toughness that you have to have. There just is. And when I say physical toughness, I'm talking about the actual ability for your body to withstand wear and tear. And that's one key part. With the 80% attrition rate, not all those people are people that quit. It's people that can't stand the cold. They physically can't handle the cold. It's people that physically can't handle the stress on your shoulders, on your neck, on your back, on your knees, on your ankles. It is very hardcore. And, there's a great article that was written by 2 female Marines that were in Afghanistan that got put out at an outpost where they were, for all practical purposes, alongside the male Marines in a field environment. And they both wrote and said, women should not be doing this. And by the way, they were both really awesome Marines who had been like some kind of collegiate athletes. They were studs, and they just said, "Look, our bodies didn't hold up." And that's one of the many things. You just said it. When you're in combat, it's not a sport. You don't go to the training room afterwards and get an ice bath and a massage. You don't. And if something happens, they don't blow the whistle and come out on the field and let the trainer work on you and then pull you off and put a substitute in. That doesn't happen on the battlefield.
And there aren't weight classes either.
Yeah, there's no weight classes for sure. It's So yeah, they need to maintain the standards, and they need to maintain the standards.
And I think we cannot allow that to slip. And I think those instructors are doing their utmost to make sure that that happens. The other thing people need to understand too is when you're a student going through this, for me, this is my dream. And guess what? Every time I'm going to a medical check during our Hell Week, which they do, every day you're getting checked every morning, and they're taking your temperature, and they're taking your SpO2 and making sure that you don't have pneumonia or you don't have some other dangerous physical medical condition. You're sweating it out. You're sweating it out because I'm not going to quit this training, but what if something that I can't control happens? What if I get pneumonia, I get fluid in my lungs? What if I get sick or something happens, or I get some infection in my leg, or I break, my ankle? These things happen to guys. Yep. And so then you can get rolled out of training. Maybe it's just compounds into an issue. So you're doing your utmost to make it through those medical checks. And people need to understand that the students are trying to get under the radar and make it happen, and will often push through injuries. A mutual friend of ours made it all the way through his Hell Week with a broken ankle, running on it. He just wasn't going to stop.
Just be tough.
Wasn't going to stop. He was being tough. So, so that's the kind of people that we want in the SEAL teams, but on the other hand, instructor staff has a difficult job because they have to make sure that those guys aren't hurting themselves. And I've actually talked to some folks who wanted to go into the SEAL teams and had some medical condition that they were failing their Navy physical. It's a very difficult physical exam you have to take, medical exam, and they said, you know what, I just need a waiver for this, and if they just give me this, and I've explained this to multiple people when they told me that. I say, listen, those waivers are there to protect you. They're there to protect you, to make sure that you don't get killed in training, and to protect the team. That when people are relying on you and you're carrying some critical piece of gear and we're covering moving, that you don't go down. So
because you're covering up some injury.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not about you; it's about the mission. And so unfortunately, this is when you're talking about these units. It's just not everybody can participate in that. Listen, I played high school football. As a linebacker and fullback, I'm 5'10", 200 pounds. I would have loved to play in the NFL. I'm not big enough or strong enough or fast enough to play in the NFL. So the NFL teams are not going to benefit if I'm playing linebacker or fullback on their teams. They're going to be weaker. They're not going to be as good. So that's just the reality of it, right? We got to keep those standards high. And political pressure, I think is a very dangerous thing. And all it takes is for, we're lucky we have some great leaders that are leading that training, that are going to keep those standards high and understand how important that is. Unfortunately, it takes one weak leader, to go in there and fold to the political pressure, and standards drop. And the world is that darkness continues to spread, particularly with that conversation that we opened this with. As darkness spreads throughout the world, we need our SEAL teams and special operators and infantry units to perform at the highest levels possible to go and be able to close with and destroy that enemy.
Indeed.